Hello and welcome to the video where I'll be showing you my top 10 games of 2020. Now, these aren't games that came out in 2020, these are the games that I have played in 2020, and I have played a grand total of 30 games so far this year. So it'll pretty much be the top third of those games and their ranking order. Also, whenever I do play a game, I always make sure to get the best version. And when I say the best version, when the game comes out, has all its DLC and all its bug fixes. I always want to play the best possible version of any game. And I always play games fully, completing as much content as possible before moving on to the next game. So if it did make its way onto this list, this should be the best of the best. Kicking off with number 10 is Middleearth Shadow of War. Shadow of War is a much improved version of its predecessor, Shadow of Mordor, having the same core combat system and nemesis system which made it famous in the first place. And overall, because of this, the gameplay is solid. And as it is improved, it features new skills, new enemies, new orc variants, new environments, new places to go, new story, new side quests, etc. Just being better. The addition which I really enjoyed the most were the fort sieges and seeing the climax of once you do go ahead and assemble your Ark, Troll, Carrigan army and getting all your boys together in one place to completely go ahead and wreck it. It is pretty damn satisfying, and then once you do take it over, they then will stick around to defend your new throne. Unfortunately, the reason that the game's not high on my list is because by the time in the game you get to your third area or third siege, third keep, the gameplay loop becomes very apparent and starts to feel very repetitive. Although the core gameplay is good, taking over a new keep in a lava area versus an ice area doesn't feel much different gameplay-wise apart from aesthetically. I almost feel like if there was less sieges or a little bit less content in the game, it may have been a bit more streamlined, but it almost felt like it was padded out a bit, and I wonder if this had anything to do with the orc gotcha system shop which was in the game which they then removed, but this definitely would have helped you speed through some of these areas instead of building up your army from scratch again. Just buy some orcs, throw them at the fort, move on to the next one. Luckily this isn't all the game is. Fortunately, we do have some story and side missions. All in all, I really enjoyed the story, and I definitely got that feeling of being involved in Middle-earth and its mythos. In the sequel, we do see some more interesting characters. Of course, we have Celebrimbor, but also we get to see more Ringwraiths, Seductive Shelob, we get to see more of Sauron, we get a actual Gondorian commander, not just NPCs with no names, an elvish assassin, while also encountering some other hidden legends within Middle-earth. With these characters in tow, we do get some truly great moments, definitely better than the previous generic slave NPCs of the past game. But anyway, combat good, story good, a little bit repetitive at times. However, the ending itself I thought was really interesting and I was very happy with it, which I don't get often from games. I'm usually let down a bit, but no, I enjoyed it. It was a good take. The DLC itself was okay. It featured Baranor and Eltariel. Better butchered that name, but it did feature different combat systems that were different from Talon, so it was a nice little change. But once again, you have to build an army, you take a keep. Overall, I thought it was lacking a little bit. They go into new areas, and we get a little bit of lore, but it would have been nice to get more, especially from Baranor in the Badlands. We get to see these other human mercenaries that live out there, and it would be nice to learn more about this kind of Mad Max area. But it is very story light. We just get to keep each take over the keep, and that's kind of it really. Still, I do love a good Lord of the Rings game, and let's see what Amazon does with the franchise. I hope that TV show is good. Number 9, Judgment. From the developers of Yakuza comes Judgment. I myself have played all the Yakuza games minus 7 and Kiwami 2, which once I finish playing Fist of the North Star, I'm going to go ahead and get that up on Game Pass. And Yakuza by far is one of my favourite franchises. You play as Yagami, a former lawyer turned detective who always fights to learn the truth no matter what, and he gets pulled into a case much larger than himself. As always with games from this dev, the story is always fantastic. It's always enthralling, intense, dramatic, emotional. They sprinkle comedy all over the place. They always take so many kinds of different twists and turns, and it can be hard to know what's going to happen next because it's just so shocking and surprising. Sometimes it's very apparent, but sometimes it blows you away. So your standard Yakuza affair. Aside from the main plot is a variety of side quests and minigames. It has a large amount, although some are definitely better than others. One thing they did add was a friend system, so that you can engage more with the residents of the city. With the more friends you make and as your reputation increases, you do unlock more content. It does give this kind of grounded feeling that makes you feel like an actual part of the city. Yet also, what's good about the side quests and minigames is that you can always focus on whatever you want. So as an example, I enjoyed pinball, side detective cases, and blackjack. However, I hated mahjong and drone races, so I just didn't do them. With each game, they do change things up and usually add some things and remove some things. Unfortunately, they took away karaoke, and I was very disappointed. One of my favorite things from the Yakuza games is hitting karaoke, especially if you get a lady friend there with you. Combat is normal Yakuza combat, although Judgment was on the new engine, and you have two fighting styles, which were Crane and Tiger. Crane for multiple enemies, Tiger for single foes. And then you have a variety of special moves that they always add with new games, and with the friend system as well integrated, your friends can also help you fight in battles and give you some new movesets. Our main dude is a detective though, so he doesn't always settle everything with his fists. He can follow, lockpick, wear disguises. Following is slow and tedious. Lockpicking is okay when you're selfing, but sometimes there's an action sequence and it's kind of like, why not just break down the door? Why do you need to lockpick it? And unfortunately, disguises can only be worn in selected mission areas. It would be nice if I could just wear a disguise on my day-to-day life going around the city. I would love to beat people up as Hobo Yagami, but I can't. Dating in this game I felt was better than the other Yakuza games though. You get to meet people during your travels and side quests, and you exchange numbers. This is much better than going into a hostess bar and just giving a girl lots and lots of money to talk to you. It felt a lot more natural, and I appreciated that. Anyway, I felt this game would have been higher on my list and much better if it was a full Yakuza game and not a weird spin-off where it kind of feels like they half leaned into some mechanics and didn't really flesh it out fully. Still, I did love it. Also, I wasn't too fond of Yagami as a character. I thought he was a little bit boring. At least in games like Yakuza 4 and Yakuza 5, there were other characters, so if there was one you didn't like the most, you did usually have your favourite on the side there. Number 8. Kingdom Come Deliverance. This game was one of the best RPGs that I've played in a long time, and I got it on the Epic Game Store for free, then bought the DLC for £12, so £12 total to access the full game. One of my favourite things within this game was the sense of progression. You go from being a peasant, nobody, to being the knight of the land, saving heroines in distress and putting down ill-doers. But it's not just like you pick up some magic sword and become King Arthur. Going from being scared of some low-level bandits, like just one or two guys ganking you, can be awful and cause you losing hours of gameplay. But through many hours of hard work and effort, you can go to the point where you turn the tables on them and you're ganking 5 to 7 armored human soldiers who have no idea who they're messing with. And if that wasn't as immersive enough of being in this old medieval era, the amount of detail that went into making the area as realistic as possible, from every town to village to wooded area, making them intertwined to this level is astonishing. One thing to note though is that the combat and some of the other mechanics in the game were a bit janky, but I will forgive it as it's usually standard whenever you do get a new IP, especially for RPGs. I'm sure the sequel, if there is one, will go ahead and refine and improve the best mechanics and hopefully gut some of the bad ones. The ones I hated most was the saving. Unless you sleep or drink a special potion, you can't save, because saving's not realistic, but drinking a potion to save is realistic. That was just really annoying. Cut the fat, keep the meat. Kingdom Come had the potential to be my #1 game of the year, as I couldn't give it anything higher for two main reasons. Those are down to bugs and performance issues. Almost 3 years after its initial release, I still need to deal with game-breaking problems, quests failing, or running into some areas that were fine before now lagging out, or being in a different wooded area and now receiving frame dips for no apparent reason. Apparently during launch, these issues were much worse, and I can't imagine trying to play this game in that state at the time. That's why you always wait for the game to come out, be patched, get all its DLC and improvements, and if it still has issues, at least wait till it's cheap enough to justify buying it at that price point. Number 7. Halo Reach. With the Master Chief Collection, all the Halo games have been coming over to PC, and I played Reach back in the 360 days during my final years of high school with my mates. Seeing it get ported over meant I had to play it again so I could relive some of those old feelings. I was able to get access for only £1 thanks to Xbox Game Pass, so I went ahead, signed up, cancelled my subscription so I don't pay reoccurring payments, downloaded the game, blasted through the campaign, and was satisfied. It, unlike some other games, definitely lived up to my rose-tinted glasses, giving me that full nostalgia euphoria. Solid gameplay, but most importantly, squad mates. Whenever I play games, I like to be a part of something rather than being a lone wolf master chief with some possible dotted NPCs. It's good to have actual engaging characters who have their own lines and personalities, and allow you to get that empty feeling inside if anything ever happened to them. I also enjoyed having abilities, even if it was things just as running or armor lock. It made it feel much faster paced and way more intense than Halo 3. Halo 3, way too slow for me. This game could have been higher, but I did want the honor to go to a new experience, a new game I played. Number 6, Horizon Zero Dawn. Dinosaurs, robots, tribal warfare, post-apocalyptic world. Horizon has fantastic art direction and gameplay. I did everything, and when I say everything, I mean absolutely everything that I could fit into this game. Every nook and cranny was explored. I got every collectible, went to every place, killed everything I could. My favorite thing was exploring the environment and seeing how each biome transitioned into each other, from luscious green plains and pines to the barren desert, back to the thick jungle, and then back to the ruins of the old world that existed before. Each area contains their own robotic inhabitants, offering new and varied challenges, which is not an issue at all with how fluid the movement is and a wide range of weaponry to choose from. My only complaint is the pacing of the story and the lore. The game has some amazing world building, history, and different factions that help populate this world and give that feeling of it being alive, yet most of it is giving in 13 to 50 minute lore dumps, which you walk through often a ruined place or something from the old world, and you only find these once maybe every 4 to 5 hours, so it's kind of like play a bit, gameplay dump, play a long time, gameplay dump. I feel like they could have had some more interesting ways to give you some of the background lore without just slogging it into one big section of exposition. It's definitely worth mentioning the DLC Frozen Wilds, because Frozen Wilds was absolutely amazing and my favourite area of the game with its own self-contained story. It's not that long, it doesn't overstay its welcome, but it's not short either, okay? We have a large amount of content and, like all good expansions should have, it has a new area that's well fleshed out, new story, characters, weapons, outfits, and even has some things that make its way back into the main game. So do the DLC before you finish up the main mission, main story. In my personal opinion, I thought the DLC story and world was much better than the base games as well. So take of that what you will. Number 5, Danganronpa. This year, I've went ahead and played Danganronpa 1, 2, and 3. All of them great, but I'm only putting one on this list for now. I chose the first game because Danganronpa is a game with a lot of mysteries, and the first game has the most impact in my opinion because you are blind to the overall arcing story. But playing number 2 and number 3, you go ahead and you speculate a lot based on what happened and what you know from the previous game. And all of the games do follow a similar format, so once you do know the format, it does become a little less surprising when someone's dead, because you do get that feeling that someone's going to die. So the first game gives that full shock value. Anyway, the story itself is cool. You have a lot of students, they wake up in a high school, only way to live is by killing and getting away with the murder. Every time someone dies, you go ahead, get a chance to investigate, collect evidence, and then hopefully solve the mystery. I thought that the mysteries in the first game were best, as I never felt like they were too easy or too hard to solve. It had a good middle ground to make each reveal quite satisfying and feel like you did the work yourself, and if you didn't quite get it, you didn't feel like an idiot or like it was moon logic. In addition, the characters are unique and interesting in both appearance and personality. If you do have a favourite character, you can always hang out with them in your spare time and learn more about their backstory. I chose to hang out with most of the female characters for reasons. While this is good from a lore perspective, it's also good from a gameplay perspective, because if you get a connection to someone, you can unlock a skill related to that person, and those skills can help you during your class investigation and trial. I don't enjoy visual novels, I always need some gameplay, and this game does does have a nice mix between each. Also, I first played this during my first lockdown in China, and I completed this, clocking in a total of 36 hours over 3 to 4 days. Each part of the game has a nice cliffhanger that makes you kind of want to go back and play, and I probably spent too much time over those 3 to 4 days playing this game. Number 4, Yakuza VI. The climax, the finale, the end of a legend. The story of Kazuma Kiryu, the Dragon of Dojima, comes to a close. Will others be able to live up to the mantle that this man set? I'm not sure, but we'll see after I play 7. Overall, I've been heavily invested in Kiryu's saga for 10 years now. Ever since I was a wee 16-year-old lad telling me dad to get into game at the Metro Centre because I wasn't old enough to get it yet. And that was Yakuza 3. Since then, I've been hooked, loving each new entry into the franchise. Even Dead Souls. Up until this point where I now feel a deep connection to the world and the characters within it, making the city of Kamurocho like a second home. When I heard that Song of Life would be Kiryu's last chapter, I wasn't sure if it could be executed well, but it was. The story itself gave a magnitude of different emotions, as these games famously do. However, some were some of the most intense that I've ever experienced. At one point, I felt legitimate anger, not because I was upset with the plot, but because I resonated so close with Kiryu in that moment that I wanted to leap through the screen and strangle one of the characters on the other side of it. But I think definitely to get the most out of this story, you should definitely play through the entire franchise first. Not necessarily because you need any background information, but just to get invested in the characters themselves, or some of these hard-hitting moments won't hit as hard and pack as much of a punch. The gameplay, combat, side quests and minigames were all fine, no complaints, standard affair. If you're going ahead and playing game number 6, you already know what you're in for. This could have been my number 1. But there was only one area where I felt like I was let down with this finale. That is the fact that many important past characters are not included within this final arc, and I would have loved to see characters such as Dojima, Majima, Date, Akiyama, Saejima, and many others come together to help give Kiryu their final send-off in their own unique ways. Many times throughout the story, I was left wondering, how would so-and-so react to this situation? What would they do? Would they be here to console Kiryu? Would they go off do their own thing? Would they go crazy? Would they go insane? How could they help out? But they just weren't there. That aside, I was left quite satisfied with what actually played out within the story, and definitely went in directions I didn't think it would go. Number 3, Tales of Berseria. My number 3 is quite interesting, and that's because it is in my top 3, yet I absolutely hated the gameplay. I found it was boring, and most fights I just button mashed, and I felt like I could have just put it on autopilot. However, the feeling of playing a JRPG from start to finish is something else. It's like finding a show that has 7 seasons or an anime that has over 100 episodes. You embark on a grand epic tale from killing boars in a forest to killing God in the heavens. This game is no exception to that rule. But I never felt bored with this long plot, and that is usually down to the main characters, and in this story, they are able to stand on their own but also synergize very well with each other. And oh, do they complement each other. We have broody half-demon Velvet, pure boy Laphicet, lone swordsman Rangetsu, magnificent Magilu, cursed pirate Aizen, and lawful good exorcist Eleanor. Kinda stereotypical, right? So what makes it special? That is that in Tales of Berseria, you do not play the good guys. Your crew is lawful evil. They have their own goals, agendas, and will achieve them no matter what, even if it's at the detriment of the greater good, which in this case is an overzealous religion feeding propaganda to control the populace. But the cult of exorcists drastically improve the lives of all of those that they touch and rule over. So anything you do to damage them also hurts the people. Need to escape an island, create a diversion to attract the town guards, bomb the port, splitting up their forces in half, leaving them scattered, steal a ship during the commotion while taking a child hostage. I love this. My main characters wanted to escape no matter what. My goal is more important and due to the plot feels valid. And it's not just evil for the sake of being evil and killing for the sake of it for no reason to say ha 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 I'm a bad guy. Their actions have both negative and positive consequences that Violet and the rest of the gang don't concern themselves with. They're doing their thing. If something good happens, it's not necessarily intentional. Something bad happens, doesn't matter. It was a nice change of pace from your standard good guys and led to some interesting developments. Due to this being a lengthy game, you get the chance to see how your actions changed and shaped the world for the better or worse. If these characters were more generic good guys, I definitely would have got bored a lot faster and this wouldn't have even made my list. Yet this game handled it well, was interesting, and I felt my 60 hours invested was well spent. Number 2, Binary Domain. Binary Domain was a game that I ignored during its initial release back in 2012, and that's mainly because it was during the era of mass third-person shooters, coming from the artistic style of gritty, grey, dark and brown. So for me it easily got lost in the mix. I had thought it was just a bland, generic action game with robot fodder, alongside a gimmicky voice mechanic. And it was until I completed the first mission and saw the cutscenes that were so incredibly cheesy and Japanese that it unveiled what I was going to be in for. An over-the-top, action-packed, overly dramatic, bordering ridiculous with comedic scenes, whether they were meant to be funny or not. I got that full B-movie vibe that you get from seeing old movies, especially Schwarzenegger ones such as him in Commando or Predator, but combined with the awesomeness of 3D animation that you normally get in the vein of Starship Troopers and Gantz. This is the kind of game that you either gel with it and love it, or you'll think it's a bit crap, especially because in this game they do really play up all the stereotypes involved. You have the honor of playing as a cocky, arrogant American dude who can do no wrong and thinks that he's God's gift. And he comes along with his buddy, another American, hoorah! You know, that kind of dickish attitude, but not as much of a dick as the main guy. So at every opportunity, he's going to call you brother and bro. Brother, brother, bro. Is that because it's American Brotherhood? I'm not sure. And to contrast this, we get two Brits that come along and they are serious. They're here to do their job and they're tired of Americans coming in, not taking it seriously. These guys don't have any time for any tomfoolery. They've got a job and they got to get it done. So we do get some clashing, especially from the dude who's the leader of the group and from the other woman who's very hard-faced, but she carries all the mass demolition gear, so you know she can kick ass when she wants to. Also included is the most French robot in the world, and it's such a treat as he's such a cool and suave character, and he speaks French whenever possible. Sacre bleu, mon ami. Is that French? Is that good French? I don't think so. And finally, the team is rounded off with an exotic, sexy Chinese sniper who's definitely here for her skill set and not for her figure. The way the characters go ahead and converse with each other is a real treat and amplified with the dialogue system. It does use the voice chat, but the voice chat included in the game is awful. I just turned that off and I use the buttons instead because you don't want to say something and then they don't recognize it and then you miss the dialogue option. So anyway, it always gives you the ability to engage with your squad mates, whether or not you're in combat, having banter in a corridor pre-combat, or at the start or end of the mission when you might be in a hub with some other NPCs. And it's a very great way to help flesh out the world and details of the characters without slowing it down. All of this is on the fly. We're never really stopping for any of these scenes. The only time we do stop is for a cutscene, and those are normally awesome. On top of that, your responses will affect your relationships with each characters, and this does actually influence the end of the game as well. Being rude and saying that Faye has a nice ass will result in you being called out, insulted, and she'll ask you to leave. As your relationship with her falls, she may then choose to ignore you in combat and be more rude to you in other conversations. Whereas if you go ahead and you don't objectify her along with your friend, your relationship with her will increase, however yours with Bo will decrease. And it's the same in other situations. Is someone suffering from some trauma? Are they having a hard time? Are you going to be empathetic with them and give them support, or are you going to tell them to man up? Each thing you do to each person will affect them differently. Bo might not like the man up response, whereas the British dude may find you insulting. I found this very immersive and often made me think and wonder what other responses would be depending on my answers. As well as that, this game of course is action packed and the shooting holds up really well. Robots do look similar, however they are fully fleshed out and they are easy to identify which type you're fighting based on their colour schemes. We got grunt bots, heavy bots, sniper bots, police bots, security bots, assassin bots. All of these spice up the game well, with the most satisfying part being when you take them down. When you spray an enemy with gunfire and you get to watch the armor plating get shredded off before the limbs start popping and the heads start rolling, it's awesome. There's no just alive or dead state with these robots. Take out their head and they'll shoot the enemies. Take out their arms, they'll run and headbutt charge you. Take out their legs, they'll do a weird exorcist crawl and try and nab you. The boss fights were equally as cool, giving you the ability to take on a range of colossal titans, although I will admit some fights were a little bit cheap. That's enough about this one. It was a blast. It wasn't the longest game in the world, it was quite linear and straightforward, but it is some of the best fun I've had for a game in a while, especially a shooter. Here it is, the moment all one person watching this has been waiting for. Number 1, Rise of the Tomb Raider. My number 1 played game of 2020 is Rise of the Tomb Raider. This game was very similar to Shadow of War, where they took all of the great things about the previous game, in this case Tomb Raider, went ahead, enhanced them, and made all the bad stuff good or better. The story in Rise of the Tomb Raider was much more enthralling and less all over the place. It had a bit more direction. The world building was fantastic. Each area had its own history and unique lore, but not just from one historical group, but instead many. With each one that entered Siberia leaving their own unique mark on the world, and managing to also influence each other in their own unique ways, even despite the many years between each of them actually exploring this area. So even though most of the game only happens in one place, it still creates a unique and varied aesthetic, and a mystery to discover what had happened before. I also loved how the world building was integrated with the exploration and gameplay mechanics. There is a huge amount to explore with every stage and every step in the story, every new area unlocked, and every new place encountered. However, you can't explore every nook and cranny of each area in one go. There are many places that are inaccessible until you progress enough through the story and you gain the right tool. So every time you return to a previously scrounged area reveals new rewards each time. The mystery of not knowing what's behind a barricade, locked door, or just on that out of reach ledge. It's so captivating, especially because behind it could be a variety of things. Is it treasure? Is it supplies? Is it weapon parts to help me upgrade? Or is it my favorite, artifacts? What I love about artifacts is when you pick them up, you can look, turn them around, and discover the story that they left behind. This is all well and good now, but it's not quite what made it my favourite game of 2020. The thing that actually made that was the gameplay, which is strange because I'm such a lore whore and I always prioritise story in my games, Tales of Berserker being a great example where as long as the story's good, I don't actually care if the gameplay's bad. So if a game does have the ability to make the gameplay seem a priority to me, that's impressive. This game did that, especially with its transversal mechanics that allow you to experience and fully explore the world fluently in interesting ways that don't get stale and stagnant over time or just feel gimmicky. Every skill or tool in your arsenal is used and needed fairly often, whether it's climbing, free running, swinging, pulling, rappelling, destroying, shooting, ziplining, etc. It's all fantastic, and rightfully so, because that's what Tomb Raider's all about. Characters were great, factions were great, enemies were great. And all of the non-exploration mechanics, such as the action and shooting segments, were equally as good and gave me a fantastic sense of progression that was simple and effective. Go ahead, take your base weapon, buy some skills. Those skills let you handle the weapon better, explore, find upgrades, attach those to your weapon. Upgrades are not just stat changes though, they actually change the visual of your weapon as well. So you don't just get better, you also look better. Eventually getting to that point where you get so many skills and upgrades that you get that power fantasy going on. Overall, epic game. Better than the last one and gave me an incredibly satisfying 34-hour playthrough. But before I go, let me quickly mention the DLC. Blood Ties provided a great insight into the Croft family history. A nightmare in Laura Croft's mind where she wakes up in the manors and shoots zombies. That sucked. Baba Yaga was awesome. They made it part of the single player campaign. You can go get it and you get a dank outfit. Alongside having a fever dream and watching a walking house. Cold Darkness, more zombies, just meh. So pretty much the canon story DLC was great. The non-canon game modes were kinda awful. That's it. My top 10 games of 2020. If you are still here to the end, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you did enjoy my take on some of the games I played this year, feel free to give a like or a dislike. Engagement is engagement. And if you want to hurt yourself more, feel free to subscribe and see more of me in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching and goodbye.